And here we go again. This is Alex. What's going on, everybody? This is part 2 of 3 of the Dominaria limited set review. We've done the white and the blue cards. If you haven't already watched that video, please go check that out. We are on to the black and the red cards today. The stuff that's going to make you kill stuff and burn stuff and attack really fast and just have a generally fun, good time, I think. So, yeah. If you haven't watched one of these before, as always, we are on a 4-point scale. Ones are the cards that you should never, ever, ever play. We have a couple of those in this set. There are even some flat-out zeros that I would not even put back into my deck box. I would just kind of throw them into the abyss. Your 2s are your generic filler. There's lots of weak 2s, strong 2s, middle-of-the-road 2s, but these are generally what your deck is going to be made up of, probably like 80% of the time. Your 3s are your higher end spells, your power uncommons, your spot removals, things like that really, those are your good first picks in draft. Or, those are cards that will pull you into a particular color within a sealed environment. And your 4s are the absolute bombs. It's the card that you open out of the back of the pack and just go, yep, play in black or play in red or whatever you're going to do. Those are the cards that will typically in games, unless your opponent is just, always top deck lucky and has the removal spell for it. But I digress. Yeah, so we're not going to waste a whole lot of time here. We're going to jump right into it. These are the black and the red cards from Dominaria. This is the EOT Newsflash. As always, let's dig it right into Blessing of Bells and Luck. I'm going to have to figure out how to say that name properly and, multiple times in this set because he keeps showing up. This is a single black instant for a common that gives target creature +2/+1 till the end of turn, and if it's legendary, it also gains lifelink. We're going to see a little bit of that legendary, if it is legendary, do X clauses on a couple of the black cards here, and this is fine. This is a good combat trick. The lifelink is pretty inconsequential here, but just be able to have a pump spell in black, especially like if you're in the black and white knight deck, or just any, black base aggressive deck. This is a perfectly reasonable spell here. And as we kind of discovered yesterday, and I worked through the math, there's about 40% of this set that actually is legendary, about 36% to be approximate there. So chances are, something that you target will be legendary, and we'll have a clause for this here. So yeah, moving right along, we've got Cabal Evangel. This is a 1 in a black common human cleric 2/2, and that's all you can say about that because it's just a bear. Moving on to Cabal Paladin, however, 3 in a black into a common human knight, so 4/2 this time, and whenever you cast a historic spell, and of course historic spells are artifacts, legendaries, and sagas, of course there are many of those, so this is probably going to trigger a couple times in a game. Cabal Paladin deals 2 damage to each opponent. Fun fact, if you're playing to a giant, that's 4, 1, 2, 3, 4 damage to their faces, because it doubles up per player. This is actually really powerful here. I would not be opposed to having this as sort of like the midpoint in my deck, especially if I have a lot of other legendary or historic cards to build around this. Maybe you've beat your opponent down with things like Cabal Evangel and Blessing of Bells and Luck, and then this just kind of comes down and it deals the last couple points of damage. Your opponent has to respect this. So I give it a little bit higher grade, that strong 2, despite it having a relatively weak body. I don't think this guy's going to get into combat too often unless you've got a trick to back him up. So, but very powerful card here. Next up, we've got Caligo Skin Witch. Ooh, that's just creepy. 1 in a black into a human wizard at common. It's a 1/3. It has Kicker, and again, Kicker allows you to pay an additional cost. Sometimes it's mana, sometimes it's a discard or a sacrifice of a creature. And when you do, when this enters the battlefield, if it was kicked, each opponent discards 2 cards. So here we go again. If you've already watched the blue and the white review, you'll know that I'm a big fan of the kicker cards, the ones that scale as the game goes later. On turn 2, it's a good blocker. On turn 5, let's see here, 6, it's going to rip out those last couple cards in your opponent's hand, especially when you're kind of in that late game spot. Typically you're running a little bit out of gas in games of limited. So this card's absolutely reasonable here. I like it as a blocker. I like it as a mind rot with a body attached to it on turn 6. So yeah, I give this one a strong 2 as well. I like it a lot. Card advantage is usually king in limited, so definitely things something to keep in mind as you're playing, especially if you're playing effects that have that discard outlet to them. Next up, we've got A card that I'm really sad did not have its original name originally attached to it. This is Cast Down. 1 and a black. It's an uncommon, destroy target non-legendary creature. There are some things that this will not kill, but the things that it can kill are plenty. I think this was like Oblivion, or something like Cast into Oblivion or something. This name is fine, but it's still completely playable. Just on rules text alone, destroy target legendary permanent or creature. It's like Doomblade, go for the throats. It's perfectly fine. It's a 3. It's a perfectly serviceable first pick in draft. Play it in limited. Awesome card. Next up, we have Chainer's Torment. 3 and a black gets you a Saga that comes in, and of course the Sagas again come in, immediately go to level 1. The following draw step turn to level 2, and on the draw step after that turn level 3, and then you sacrifice it at that point. On levels 1 and 2, it deals 2 damage to each opponent. Again, if it's 2-headed giant, you're going to double up on that, and you gain 2 life. And then on level 3, you create an XX Black Nightmare Horror Creature token, where X is half of your stupid alerts, where X is half of your life total rounded up if X, or it deals X damage to you. Whew! There's a lot going on there. So this is pretty reasonable. It's an 8-point life to get across turns 1 and 2, and that demon is completely capable of just ending the game if they haven't done a lot to if they haven't been all that aggressive. If this one is kind of slow, like I think it might actually be, this is a perfectly reasonable thing to have. It's a 2 for me. It's decent filler. I'm not super impressed with it, but I definitely can see some merit here. If it could go to the creatures instead of just to the face at levels 1 and 2, this would be a little bit better, I think. Next up, we've got Dark Bargain. This is a reprint from, I forget when. 3 and a black gets you an instant at common that lets you look at the top 3 cards of your library, put 2 of them into your hand and the other into your graveyard, and then it deals 2 damage to you. It's kind of nice to see that we've got a little shout out to Nevinrel, or Larry Nevin. Nerenvil's, whatever, in the flavor text, sorry. If the format is slow, this is absolutely amazing, especially if you're in black, which definitely does have an element of recursion to its color, or its identity in this set, so I definitely like it for that. If the format is pretty aggressive, though, this might not be worth it. But for formats that are typically slower, like limited, or especially pre-releases, this can be pretty powerful here. If it is aggressive, though, I'd leave this one in my sideboard, in the box, or just in the pack altogether. Other than that, yeah, solid 2 for me, though. Next up, we've got our first fungus, our Thalids. I was really surprised the deeper I got into this set review just how many of these damn things are actually in this set, and just how much support there are for the Thalid and fungus and sapperling ilks. So for 2 and a black, you get a common fungus 3/2, and when it dies, you create a 1/1 green sapperling creature token. This is completely reasonable. 3 mana 3/2s are always playable in limited, and to get some bonus on the back end of it, perfectly fine. This is a solid 2 for me. If you have it in the Thalid deck, however, then things get out of control because the engines that are in this archetype, and it is a very specific archetype, you can do a lot of really cool things with it, and we'll get into those cards. We'll see a lot of those cards in the green setup part of our set review here, so we'll get to those here in a little bit. Moving right along to it, though, we've got Demonic Vigor. A single black gets you an enchantment aura at common that enchants a creature, gives it +1/+1, and when that creature dies, return that card to its owner's hand. This has become a pretty staple effect in most sets, where you get this sort of reanimation effect or recursive effect off of your black pump spells, and I like this just fine. Just be wary of the creature being bounced in response, or just being bounced in general, and the aura falling off. If you've got a big guy that you want to keep around, though, those are typically your better targets for it. It's a little bit weak, since there is much bounce within blue. I'm less inclined to take cards like this, but if I'm really aggressive in the draft, at that point, then I'll look at this a little bit more closely. Next up, we've got the Demon Lord Belzenlock himself. 4 black legendary creature, Elder Demon, at Mythic, 6/6, flying trample. When it enters the battlefield, exile cards on the top of your library until you exile a non-land card. Then put that card into your hand. If that card's converted mana cost is 4 or greater, repeat this process, and then Belzenlock deals 1 damage to you for each card put into your hand this way. So, Here are some things this guy does. He draws you one card automatically. If you have built your deck in such a way that it is a higher on the curve, especially if you play this later in the game when there might be a higher density of higher end cards left in your deck, he could draw you, 1+. I don't know what the math is here, and I'm not going to try and figure that out just because it's just a powerful card here for sure, especially limited. He's a solid 3 for me. There's a ton of cool flavor here. All of the black demon lords that Liliana has been in servitude to. This is the last one before she kills him in this set. No spoilers there. They're all really flavorful, and I like this guy a lot for limited. He will probably die to this thing because he's huge. And unless you've got removal for it, bouncing him is not a good idea at all. So, solid 3 for me, and we'll move right on to Divest. A single black common sorcery. Target player reveals their hand, and you may choose an artifact or creature card from it, and they discard it. No. No. Only if your opponent's deck is so stacked with massive legendaries like Bells Unlock over here, or anything like that. I mean, you've got to have a damn good reason to waste one of your 40 slots in your deck with something like this. There is a potential for some of the artifacts in this set just become so apparently and egregiously powerful, within the context of the format. Then sure, maybe, but up until that point, this is completely unplayable. It's a flat 0 for me. Just leave this one behind. Moving along to our Dread Shade. This is our black triple devotion guy that all those mono black devotion players in Modern are just going haywire for. I don't see it. For 3 black, you get a rare shade 3/3 that you can pay black and give it +1/+1 until the end of turn. This is fine. The biggest problem here is that typically he's just going to be a 3-mana 3/3, which on stats alone is really unimpressive. When you factor in that he is triple black 3/3, he becomes even less impressive. So you've really got to slant your deck towards being almost mono black to make this guy worth it. He doesn't fly, which is really strange. Typically shades are known to fly. This guy's just really underwhelming, and I just don't see him doing anything. He's a solid 2 for me, weak on that point even. So I wouldn't be going on my way to first pick this guy, and yeah, not that impressive, but he fills the curve at the very least. Next up, we've got kind of a weird one here, and I actually had to read this guy a couple times before I really kind of captured what he was trying to do. This is Drudge Sentinel. 2 and a black gets you a common skeleton warrior and you get as a 2/1. You may pay 3 and tap it, and it gains indestructible until the end of turn. This is a weird ability because I read this and just go, he might as well have Defender because I'm probably never attacking with this. It's a good late game blocker, but still pretty underwhelming. If they've got a big guy that you can just keep held down with Drudge Sentinel here, not Drudge Skeleton, he's terrible. Drudge Sentinel here, then he's pretty good at that point. And if you've got the mana left over to do that, then sure, by all means, go ahead and then turn the corner, start attacking with it. Maybe, I don't know. I'm not that impressed by it. It's a 2. Again, solid curve filler and not much else. Next up, we've got the Eldest Reborn, another saga here in black. 4 and a black gets you a saga. At level 1, each opponent sacrifices a creature or planeswalker, and of course that counts. Well, actually, it's not 2-headed giant because it just counts for each player. So yeah, never mind that. Level 2, each opponent discards a card, and on level 3, put target creature or planeswalker card from a graveyard onto the battlefield under your control. If this said for each opponent on level 3, then you have my attention. As it stands, this is a really weak 2 for me. I do not think that edicts on 5 are all that impressive unless it's just your opponent's last creature, which it could be, it might not be, I don't know. And the later the game goes, the cards they have in their hand are much more, valuable to them, especially if they're late game bombs. And then putting the creature in play or the planeswalker, like 9 times out of 10, there will be no planeswalker in the bin for you for limited. This is just really underwhelming. This is a very weak 2 for me. If the format is slower, though, especially, then this becomes even worse. Fast formats, worse. This card really has no place for me. I don't like it at all. Next up, we have Eviscerate. Not often you see common 4s. For 3 and a black, you get a common sorcery that destroys target creature, kill it dead. This is 4. This is an absolute 4 for me. This is one of those commons I will actually take over some rares or even uncommons just because it just does what it does so efficiently. I do like that it is common though, which means you can pick up multiples of these. You know, unless there are multiple black drafters on your table or in your pool, you'll be have a more opportunity to get multiple of these. Shame it can't be instant speed, but you know, we can't have everything that we want. Moving on to Feral Abomination. 5 and a black gets you a Thrall at common, 5/5 Death Touch. And this art is disgusting. I don't really know what a Thrall is in this context, but it is grody. So, 6 mana, 5/5 Death Touch. Yeah, this is strong filler for me, solid 2. Nothing more you can really say about it. This is going to be probably a good beater in your limited decks if you don't have, you know, the bigger high-end bombs. This is completely serviceable, and we'll take down most things that block it, or are stupid enough to block it. Moving right along. Gonna move into Final Parting. This is some kind of story card here where Liliana's apparently killed her brother Josu, who we actually will see in this row of cards actually. 3 black lets you search your library for 2 cards, put one in your hand and the other into your graveyard, and shuffle your library. This is really slow unless you've got just an absolute bomb or multiples actually, and have a way to get them back out of the graveyard, which I have said, you know, there is that ability within this color here. This is really underwhelming, you know. Demonic, oh shoot, what was the 2 black one that I'm forgetting now? Demonic Tutor. It's not Demonic Tutor. Diabolic Tutor. There we go. You know, cards like this are fine. You know, they're not all that impressive though. This is a 1.5 for me at best. Yeah, I need something in my deck really powerful to make me warrant an inclusion in this for him. But you know, it's cool story plot though. Next up we have Fungal Infection. Here's more of those Saproling guys. For a single black instant, you get a common that gives target creature -1/-1 until the end of turn, and you create a 1/1 green Saproling creature token. When I first reviewed this card, I thought it was crap. Now that I see how many Saprolings and Thalids are in this set, I don't think that is the case anymore. This is a great way to kill off an early creature. There are plenty of X1s in multiple colors, actually, that this will pick off, and then having the token left behind, or even using the token to block an X2 in some cases, is actually really powerful here, and this can probably be a cornerstone if you are playing the black-green Thalid deck, and again, we'll see more of those cards as we get into green. So, pretty solid here. I'll give it a solid 2 for me, though, if you're in that deck. Kind of a build around me, though, in this case here. Next up, we've got Yosu Ves. This is Liliana's brother. Lich Knight. 2 black gets you a legendary creature. Zombie Knight at rare. It's a 4/5, and you can kick it for 6. 6! This guy's total CMC is 10! What the hell? But on the upside, if you are managing to pull that off, he enters the battlefield and brings along 8 2/2 black Zombie Knight creature tokens with Menace. Dear God. There are ways to get to 10 mana in this format. I don't think it's all that likely, but it is possible. If you untap with this, with the 8 zombies, you probably win the game on the spot. You know, 4 mana 4/5s are fine enough, and this guy even has Menace by himself, which is pretty good. That kicker cost is just so rough. So 2.5 for me. He's really powerful by himself, and if you get to it, you probably win the game on the spot, actually. Next up, we've got Khazarov, Sengir Pureblood, 5 black legendary creature vampire at rare, 4/4 flying, and when a creature an opponent controls is dealt damage, put a +1/+1 counter on Khazarov, Sengir Pureblood. So combat just makes this guy insanely huge, and you can pay 3 in a red and have him deal 2 damage to target creature. So this is not Liliana, but Olivia Voldaren, just a lot weaker and more expensive here. We also had that dragon in Theros block that did something similar to this and would get out of control as well. Khazarov here. This guy's insanely powerful. On 7, you know, he's kind of, you know, late to the party, but he will start cleaning up everything that is left on the battlefield, and he is super hard to block in the air, and if you have any amount of removal, as in a black deck should, you're probably pretty well set up to win the game here. If he wasn't 7 mana, I I had him a little bit higher, but as he is a really strong 3 here and an easy first pick for me in draft. And let's move right along to another Black Knight. This is the Knight of Malice. Again, the legend of the Black Knight lives on, and if you saw my review for the Knight of Glory, you know what I feel about this guy already. First strike, hexproof from white, +1/+0. If a player controls a white permanent, which hopefully you do playing Knights, 1 in a black, uncommon Knight, yeah. This guy's perfectly fine. So many Knights in this set that are good for that deck. If there is not some kind of black-white aggressive Knight tribal deck in Standard, I will be surprised, to say the least. But this card's really powerful. Yeah, great card, great card. Next up, we have Lich's Mastery. 3 black, black, black. Legendary enchantment at rare that has hexproof itself and says you can't lose the game. Whenever you gain life, draw that many cards. Whenever you lose life, for each life you lose, exile a permanent you control or a card from your hand or graveyard, and when it leaves the battlefield, you lose the game. Obviously, the idea is not to let this thing be exiled from its own trigger here. Now, this thing needs to be built around. It might be playable better or more so in Standard, where you can actually build a control deck around this, but you do need to have a way to gain life as well to actually get the full effect out of this. If you've got it, though, on turn 6, you're probably not losing the game anymore unless your opponent just manages to turn the corner and aggro you out really fast. This card's incredibly powerful, but does need the support around it. And if you got it, go for it. Next up, we have Lingering Phantom, 5 in a black for an uncommon spirit, 5/4. And whenever you cast a historic spell, you may pay the black. If you do, you can return it from your graveyard to your hand. I like recursive threats, and if you've got if you have the support for it in the historic spells, this thing is going to be an absolute monster for your opponent to deal with, unless they just exile it outright. Very, very powerful, strong 2.5 for me. I like this guy a lot, even just by himself. The sets are absolutely fine, but if you have a way to recur, like I said, even better. Next up, Phyrexian Scriptures. This was the first saga we actually had revealed to us, and this is the one where I kind of went, is this a magic card? I can't really tell. 4 black, or 2 black, black gets you a saga. On level 1, it puts a +1/+1 counter on up to 1 target creature, and that creature becomes an artifact in addition to its other types. Level 2 destroys all non-artifact creatures, and level 3 exiles cards from all opponents' graveyards. So this is really, really powerful. Black and blue, and to an extent, black or blue and white actually really like to have this, or actually we'll just focus on black and blue here, have a really strong artifact sub-theme that goes with them, more so in their uncommon golds especially. This is an incredibly powerful card. If you have a couple artifact creatures that are going to be around once this goes off on level 2, even better. And even on level 1, if you've got a good, beater out there that you can make indestructible to its own claws here, this is an incredibly powerful card. This is a 3.5 for me. Wraths, as always, really good and limited, and if you can keep a creature around through it, all the better. Level 3, whatever. Next up, we have the return of a card that I'm sure will be like $1 a piece at some point in the future. Rat Colony. 1 in a black gets you a common creature rat that gets +1/0 for each other rat you control, and a deck can have any number of cards named Rat Colony. I guarantee you there is somebody at your LGS who is literally doing backflips in their sleep because they get to add more rats to their rat tribal decks. Strange individuals they are, I think. It's a good early beater here. It's fine. For, 2-mana 2/1s, it's almost bare stats, and I guess you can always draft the rat deck if you are really up for something like that. Right. Moving on, Rite of Bells and Lock. 2 black, black gets you a saga. Levels 1 and 2, you get 2 0/1 black cleric creature tokens. And on 3, you get a 6/6 black demon creature with flying and trample that says, at the end of your upkeep, sack a creature, and if you can't, this creature deals 6 damage to you. I believe this is the old... It's not Juzam it's... I forget the one I'm thinking of. It was recently printed in Iconic Masters, though. Blast. Whatever. This is insanely powerful. On 4, if you've got some creatures already on the board that are, like throwaways, maybe even some other tokens that are being made from your other green and black cards like Thalids. You've got some fodder for this thing, and if your opponent hasn't been pressuring you, the demon this will create will actually just kill them, I believe. This is really powerful. I like this card a lot. Armies in a can that fuel their top end, super powerful, and that art is just so creepy. Next up, we have Settle the Score. 2 black gets you a sorcery at uncommon, exiles a creature, and you put 2 loyalty counters on a planeswalker you control. This is where Liliana kills Bells Unlock. Like I said, there are no spoilers in this set because the cards just say that it happens. This is awesome. 3.5 for me. Exiling creatures is better than destroying them. And if you have a planeswalker, cool, gravy. 3.5 for me. Doesn't get much better than this unless it's instant speed. Next up, we have Soul Salvage. 2 and a black returns up to 2 target creature cards from your graveyard to your hand. This is a sorcery at common. This is pretty solid filler, actually. I like cards that do this simply because if you've got some bombs that your opponent has removed already, this is a great way to get them back. You know, recursive threats are always powerful in limited games. And if you've gone to the point where your opponent is out of removal, or you've taxed the removal to the point where they just don't have good options anymore, this is how you get back in the game, and there's plenty of good bombs in multiple colors that black can support easily to really make this card powerful. I like it a lot. Solid 2 for me. Very decent filler. Next up, we've got the Stronghold Confessor. This is a part of that Cabal thing that Josu runs or something like that. Single black gets you a 1/1 with Menace, and if you kick it by paying a 3 additional, it comes in the battlefield with 2 +1/+1 counters. Awesome. Again, scaling threats into the late game are always good, and I will be happy to pay 4 mana for a 3/3 with Menace. As we've already seen, there are a couple of blue cards like Rescue that would allow you to reset this later in the game once he's outlived his initial usage. So very, very powerful card, I think. I like Stronghold Confessor a lot. I give it a solid 2. Next up, we have Thallid Omnivore. 3 and a black gets you a creature fungus at common. It's a 3/3, and you can pay 1 to second creature, and it gets +2/+2 until the end of turn. If a Saproling, you see where this is going, was sacrificed this way, you gain 2 life. Again, this is a solid filler 2. It's mediocre filler, but if you are in that black-green Thallid deck, then it becomes a lot better on its own stats, and without the Saproling clause, this is still a completely reasonable thing to play in your deck. I do quite like this a lot. Better in the Thallid deck, though, like obviously. Next up, we have Thallid Soothsayer. 3 and a black gets you a uncommon creature fungus, 2/3. You may pay 2 second creature and draw a card. This is what I'm talking about here. You don't need or any more Saprolings to make this guy work. He's just powerful. So if you've got some creatures that have outlived their usefulness, or you want to blank a removal spell or anything like that, this is the way to do that with this guy. I like cards that do this a lot, especially if you do have the engine to recur the threats like black seems to. We'll get to a card actually here in a minute that really pushes that theme home that I like quite a bit. Definitely a strong 2 for me here. Next up, we've got, I want to yell this guy's name so bad, Torgar Famine Incarnate. 6 black, legendary creature avatar at rare, is a 7/6. As an additional cost to cast this spell, you may sacrifice any number of creatures, and this spell costs 2 generic mana less to cast for each creature sacrificed this way. And when Torgar Famine Incarnate enters the battlefield, up to one target player's life total becomes half their starting life total rounded down. So this guy actually has 2 modes, if you can believe it or not. For the super aggressive decks who flood the board, and then maybe like on turn 4 or 5 when you've got a bunch of cheap dudes in play, you slam this and fireball your opponent down, down to 10 if they manage to have some decent blocks or whatever. Really powerful. On the back end, late game control decks just go casually. I'll sack like 2 dudes, and I'm at, let's say, 4. I'll go back up to 10. So this guy has a dual role to play, and I will need to see this guy actually in action before I can really kind of give a final rating on him. But my initial feeling is that he is very powerful. I gave him a 3, but there is some room for that to change significantly if it's not as good as I think it is. Next up, we've got God, man, Wizards. Killing me here, guys. There we go. Urgoros, the empty one. I do love a big flying black specter. 4 black, black, uncommon, legendary creature specter, 4/3 flying. When it deals combat damage to a player, they discard a card at random, and if they can't, you draw a card. Now, pop quiz. What happens late in the games of Limited? Correct. Your opponents typically don't have many cards in their hand, and typically you don't either. This is the way to break that in half and get back in the game. Start drawing more cards and really pull ahead. This guy is insane. The 3 toughness kind of sucks, but whatever. Solid 3 for me. I like this guy a lot. Next up, we have Vicious Offering. 1 in a black for an instant at common. Kicker, second creature. Target creature gets -2/-2 until the end of turn. If it was kicked, that creature gets -5/-5 until the end of turn. This is completely playable. Scalable removal is always good. If you have the fodder to kick this, even better. I like this card quite a bit, actually. This is a strong 2 for me. Maybe not first pick removal, but pretty darn close. Next up, we have our recursive threat dude, Whisper Blood Liturgist. 3 in a black, it gets you a legendary creature, human cleric at uncommon. As a 2/2, you can tap it and sacrifice 2 creatures and return target creature from your graveyard to the battlefield. This is the way you get all these giant guys out of the yard once they're dead. You've got the fodder from like the Thalids or just extra tokens you've made, or any, cheapo dork creature you just don't need anymore. It's instant speed too. This is insane. Like, it's amazing. This guy's really strong. He does need to be built around a little bit. I don't think that you can just jam him into any deck. Maybe you can, but when you build around him, he's much, much stronger in just your rando generic black deck, though. Still some value, but I think, with some support, he's a lot better, obviously. Next up, we have Windgrace Acolyte. 4 in a black gets you a creature cat warrior that flies, and when it enters the battlefield, put the top 3 cards of your library into your graveyard, and you gain 3 life. I am completely fine paying that cost and getting this kind of power out of it, and that's a giant pterodactyl, it looks like. That's awesome. Yeah, this card is actually really powerful, especially if you are trying to do something with Whisper or any of the other black recursive threats in this set. 3 life is nothing to scoff at, and 5 mana for a 3/2 flyer, completely serviceable here. Really, really strong card. I like this guy a lot. Moving on to our last 2 black cards, we've got... Oh, this card makes me so happy. Yargle, Glutton of Urborg, 4 in a black, legendary creature, Frog Spirit. Uncommon. It's a 9/3. Who came up with these stats? And I just have to read the flavor text here because it has no rules text. When Bells Locke's lieutenant, Yarkul, grew too ambitious, the Demon Lord transformed him into a maggot. The frog that ate the maggot grew and grew until a ravenous spirit burst from its body. Man, it's a bad day when you're walking through, Urborg, and you're like on patrol, and all of a sudden, like, you see this frog, and they're like, "Oh, look at that!" And then, I am Yargle. If you can protect this guy in combat, holy crap, he's gonna eat everything. Strong 2. Absolute flavor win. Although not as much for Yawgmoth's Vile Offering. 4 in a black, legendary sorcery. Can only be cast if you control a legendary creature or planeswalker. Also at rare, you may put up to 1 target creature or planeswalker from a graveyard on the battlefield under your control, and then destroy up to 1 target creature or planeswalker. Exile Yawgmoth's Vile Offering. Yeah, this is a really powerful card here. Yeah, solid 3 for me. The legendary clause is a bit of a hoop to jump through, but as we've already seen, there are enough cards in this set that are legendary to get this through, to make this work here, I think. Yeah, this is awesome removal, and the fact that it gets planeswalkers as well is actually really important. I can see this card being pretty impactful in Standard in the coming months. So, very powerful card indeed. So, those are the black cards. Let's waste no time and move right into red. Wooburg Order for the win. We'll change the tab on the notes. Moving right along, this is the Bloodstone Goblin. 1 in a red gets you a Goblin Warrior at common 2/2, and whenever you cast a spell, if that spell was kicked, Bloodstone Goblin gets +1/+1 and menace until the end of turn. We are going to see a ton of red spells with kicker. Red and green have the glut of them for the most part, and we actually get to some cards that really pay off for you playing kicker spells here. So very powerful card here. Definitely a stronger 2, but does need that surplus of spells to be as impactful, but even on its own stats, 2 mana 2/2s are bears and perfectly playable. Next up, we have Champion of the Flame, 1 in a red, human warrior at uncommon. It's a 1/1 with trample, and it gets +2/+2 for each aura and equipment attached to it. We're also going to see a lot of auras in red as well that make this guy pretty impactful. You do need to build around him, though, because he is otherwise very unimpressive, and I'm not going to just go on my way to slap random auras on this guy, so he needs the support to get there. He's a solid build around me for me, though, and if you do manage to do that, very, very powerful. Next up, we have Fervent Strike. A single red gets you an instant at common, and target creature gets +1/+0 and gains first strike and haste until the end of turn. This is fun. I like this card a lot, simply because you play a big dude, and your opponent's like, oh, okay, I'm safe. Fervent Strike. Oh no! Solid 2 for me. I quite like this a lot. Nothing fancy though. It's a solid aggressive combat trick though. Next up, we have Fiery Intervention, 4 in a red sorcery at common that you can choose 1 to deal 5 damage to target creature or destroy target artifact. And I love the art because Chandra's literally just like, I don't know which one to choose. In red, you do often need ways to kill bigger guys. This is going to do it, albeit very expensively. And occasionally, the artifact removal might actually come up. There are some in this set that are actually worth blowing up. And this is totally main-nickable though, so very powerful red card here, I think. Next up, we see our first image of Jaya Ballard. Fight with fire, 2 in a red, sorcery at uncommon, kicker for 5 and a red. Fight fire deals 5 damage to target creature. If this spell was kicked, however, it deals 10 damage divided as you choose among any number of targets instead. Those targets can include players and planeswalkers. They have to add that clause now for reasons that I don't quite understand and don't really care about because it doesn't affect Modern at all. Who cares? This card is actually really powerful here. For 3 mana, I will gladly burn out a creature. Now for that massive 9 mana, this ends the game. The board is clear. Game over, Joe. I don't know who Joe is, but yeah, the game's over for Joe if you're targeting him with this. Really powerful card. 2.5 for me. Again, scalable removal is always powerful here. Next up, we've got a massive throwback to, I believe, Alpha. This is the Fire Elemental, 3 red, 5/4 common. Yep. Solid. Moving along. Fire Fist Adept, 4 in a red gets you a human wizard at uncommon. It's a 3/3, and as it enters the battlefield, it deals X damage to target creature an opponent controls, where X is the number of wizards you control. At least it's 1 damage, and in the very draftable, I should say, wizard deck, this thing can get out of control real quick and probably kill, I would say, a majority of the things in this set if you have the wizard support for it. Very, very powerful card here. I like this guy a lot. This is a solid 2 for me in that deck, and definitely just needs to be built around, of course. Next up, we have the First Eruption. This is another saga here. 2 in a red gives you a saga at rare. On level 1, it deals a damage to each creature without flying. On level 2, you add red to your mana pool. Sure. And on level 3, you can sacrifice a mountain. If you do, the First Eruption deals 3 damage to each creature. I don't like this at all, personally. This is some really strange red removal. I get that it's very much a delayed, like, Slagstorm or Anger of the Gods effects, but I'm really kind of on the fence with this one. I don't know what to do with it. If it could hit players on level 3, then it becomes absurd because they're just like, well, I have 6 mountains, take 18. Or actually, you can't repeat the effect. Can you repeat the effect? I don't know. I'll have to find out. But yeah, I don't like this card at all that much. Build around it if you've got a way to do it. Cool. If not, let's move right along to a saga that I actually do like in red. This is the Flames of, or just the Flame. Only one flame. Keld only has one flame. One in a red lets you discard your hand, and then at level 2, draw 2 cards. And level 3, if a red source you control would deal damage to a permanent or player this turn, it deals that much damage plus 2 instead. Once I read this again, I realized just how powerful this was. I thought it was red instants and sorceries, because that's typically how these cards work, but this is anything. Creatures, spells of any kind. So that's amazing and can easily just kill your opponent, especially coming down on turn 2. In a really aggressive deck, maybe even modern, maybe. You play this, you drop your hand, you draw up to 3 on the following turn, and then whatever you throw at your opponent on turn 5 just burns them out, or whenever this gets cast. Like, this is a really powerful card and a very solid 2, and I would not be embarrassed to play this in limited, especially late in the game where the discard is actually not all that of a drawback here. Very powerful card. Next up, we have Frenzied Rage. 1 in a red gets you an enchantment aura at common, enchants a creature, and gives that creature +2/+1, and has Menace now. Again, these are solid 2s here. These auras are really powerful. Blue obviously has the bounce to to totally undo your hard work here. But if it comes down fast enough, whatever you put this on may just kill your opponent quick. I say live fast and die hard. Next up, gets you Chronicler. 1 in a red gets you a human wizard at common. It's a 1/3, and you can kick it for 3 in a red. As it enters the battlefield, if it was kicked, return target instant or sorcery from your graveyard to your hand. So, in the wizard deck, this is very good, because you have spells in the wizard deck. So yeah, there you go. Solid 2. Get to Journey Mages next. 2 in a red, human wizard, 3/2. As it enters the battlefield, if you control another wizard, this fiery lass here with her red hot poker is going to deal 2 damage to each opponent. Again, nice little value here for a good shock. See what I did there? Bad jokes. Again, wizard deck, etc., etc. It's early, guys. Bear with me. Get to Lava Runner, not Mancer. Lava Runner is next. A single red creature, human wizard at common, 1/2, and as long as there are 2 or more instants or sorceries in your graveyard, Mr. Lava Runner gets +1/+1 and haste. So this is actually kind of impressive here. You do need the build around me aspect to get maximum value out of this. Drawing him in the late game is probably pretty underwhelming, but early game, if you fire off a couple of cheap spells, which there are enough of in red, I can see this actually doing some pretty solid work here. I quite like this. Next up, we have Goblin Barrage, which is frankly terrifying because there's just catapults and goblins everywhere here. 3 in a red, kicker, sacrifice an artifact or goblin, and it deals 4 damage to target creature, and if it was kicked, it also deals 4 damage to target player or planeswalker. This is awesome. You definitely would be able to kick this bad boy to get maximum effect, and fortunately there are enough goblins and goblin token generators in this set, in particular one very powerful goblin token generator, to make this card just be absolutely brutal. I like this quite a bit. Solid 2 for me. Happy to play it. Next up, we've got the Goblin Chain Whirler. Bad jokes. 3 red, just red for a Goblin Warrior at rare. 3/3 first strike, and as it enters the battlefield, if it deals 1 damage to target opponent and each creature or planeswalker they control. So if you can get this down fast enough, it can probably wipe the board. If it had haste, it'd be even better. If this is following Goblin War Chief, which we'll see next, even better. Yeah, this guy's, they're hard to play because it's of the 3 red here. The red, I should say. So draft it better, decent and sealed, just needs to have your mana base slanted pretty aggressively in one direction, red being that direction. Now, Goblin War Chief gives the Chain Whirler the haste that it probably needed. For 1 red, uncommon, 2/2, Goblin Warrior makes your goblin spells cost 1 less, and you give them all haste now. So that's pretty sweet. By himself, he's just meh. With goblins in the deck, awesome. So a little bit more of a build around me card than anything, but still a very powerful effect, especially if you're trying to get into the goblin modern deck, where this guy actually plays a pretty significant role here. Next up, we've got Haphazard Bombardment. I love this card and just what this card actually does for red, because it does something that typically red cannot do. Haphazard Bombardment is a 5 and a red enchantment at rare. As it enters the battlefield, choose 4 non-enchantment permanents you don't control and put an aim counter on each of them. At the beginning of your end step, if 2 or more permanents you don't control have an aim counter on them, destroy one of those permanents at random. So 4 things, one's going down, and then another one's going down, and another one's going down until the last thing is left alive. So it's very clever, actually, and very, very thematically on red. It's pretty unimpressive, cost-wise, but the effect, because it will take out planeswalkers, artifacts, lands, creatures. This is actually pretty impressive stuff here. It's solid 2, but a very weak 2 at that. Now, that being said, our next card here, Miss Jaya Ballard. Been waiting for her to show up at some point in this set. 2 red, red, red. Legendary Planeswalker Jaya, mythic rare, starts with 5 loyalty. Her +1 lets you add 3 red mana that can only be spent to cast instant or sorcery spells. Kind of a downside, but she makes up for it with her other +1, which allows you to discard up to 3 cards and draw that many cards. And her -8 gives you an emblem with, you may cast instant and sorcery cards from your graveyard. If a card was cast this way, would be put in your graveyard, exile it instead. So it's like super Snapcaster Burn Mage here. She is incredibly powerful. The only downside from me giving her an absolute 4 is that triple red in her mana cost. But on turn 5 and beyond, where the game gets a little bit later, a little bit grindier, this is actually totally serviceable here. She's incredibly powerful. And if you just happen to get this next card, Jaya's Immolating Inferno, I don't think you lose the game, because X red red, legendary sorcery, if you've got Jaya, for instance, it deals X damage to each of up to 3 targets. You will probably end the game on the spot, because by itself, curving Jaya into this, you're already dealing 4 damage to 3 targets. And beyond that, get out of town. This card is absolutely incredible here. It's a weaker 3, and like I said, if you can curve it, awesome. If not, it's still an incredibly powerful sorcery here to take out, a good number of threats here. Very, very powerful, and probably gorgeous in foil as well. Next up, we have got the Keldon Overseer. 2 and a red for a human warrior at common. 3/1 kicker, 3 and a red haste. As it enters the battlefield, if it was kicked, you may do the whole threaten effect. Again, control the creature until the end of turn. Give it haste and untap it. Solid 2. Again, scalable creatures are just powerful in this case. So I would not be embarrassed to put this into any deck that I've got, especially later in the game where my opponent might have a bomb that typically I could not beat as a red mage. Very, very impressive, though. Next up, we've got the Keldon Raider. Keldon Marauder, eat your heart out, man. 2 red red for a common human warrior, 4/3. As it enters the battlefield, you may discard a card, and if you do, draw a card. I will absolutely always 100% probably do this, because that's just good Magic thinking right there. 2.5 for me. The 3 toughness is a little bit of a letdown, but card filtering in red is super important, and this is a big beefy body that can definitely deal some damage, so a solid 2.5 for me. Next up, we have the Keldon Warcaller. 1 and a red, human warrior, 2/2. Whenever it attacks, you may put a lore counter on target saga you control. That's pretty sweet. This is the only way in the set to actually do this. You cannot add them by any other means. This is the only card here. So if you do have a couple sagas in your deck, this might be one way to skip to their higher and more impactful abilities in most cases. This is pretty powerful here. Even by itself, 2-mana 2/2s are perfectly fine, and I really like the art here. It's very evocative of some old school fantasy art. I'm blanking on the guy's name all of a sudden. It starts with an F. Sorry. Tangents. Orcish Vandal is next. 1 and a red, Orc Warrior, uncommon, 1/1. You may tap it and second artifact to deal 2 damage to any target. you're going to need a massive surplus of artifacts to make this guy worth it, which I don't think he is in general. It's a B for me just because you have to build around it, and even if you are building around it, I would maybe question your deck building choices. Now, Radiating Lightning. 3 in a red instant common that deals 3 damage to target player and 1 damage to each creature that player controls. That's pretty gnarly, actually. The 3 can't go to creatures, which is a major downside for this card, but this is a good way to tip combat in your favor, especially in aggressive red decks especially. This is a 2 for me. I just wish it was a little bit more flexible in what it does, but combining this with other red anthems or pump effects, this is actually pretty powerful here, and I do like it quite a bit in a very aggressive red draft deck. Next up, we've got an absolute flavor win here. Rampaging Cyclops, 3 in a red common 4/4 that gets -2/-0 as long as 2 or more creatures are blocking it, because Cyclops only have 1 eye, so it can't see the other guy. So, yeah. Weak filler, but cool flavor, and that's about it. But 1 eye, get it? Get it? Run Amok is next. 1 in a red instant gets you a common. Target attacking creature gets +3/+3 and gains trample until the end of turn. Oof! This will make you trade up, I would say, 80% of the time? Easily? This is insane. This card is way, way powerful. I love it. I love it. I love it. Strong 2. Happy to play this in all my aggressive red decks. Seismic Shift is next. 3 in a red sorcery at common, destroy target land. Not impressive. Up to 2 target creatures can't block this turn. Very impressive. One of the hardest things that red decks have a hard time doing is getting through in the late game, especially if your opponent has stabilized with like a couple big creatures. Good falter effects like this, I think, should be staples in just about any set for red. The land destruction is completely irrelevant, but falter effects like this are very, very powerful and definitely something to watch out for to get through those last couple points of damage in a limited game here. Next up, we have Shivan Fire. 1 red instant, kicker 4 at common that deals 2 damage to target creature, and if the spell was kicked, it deals 4 damage instead. Why can't this go to the face? That's my only question here. Solid 2. Scaling removal is always good. No complaints. Next up, we've got all the way back from, I believe, Scourge, the Siege Gang Commander. 3 red, creature goblin at rare 2/2. When it enters battlefield, create 3 1/1 red goblin creature tokens. You may pay 1 in a red and sack a goblin, and it deals 2 damage to any target. I do miss like the old school, like massively hulked out commander, but this guy's totally fine. He's still amazing. Ready? Fire, I guess. It's an absolute 4 for me. Like, this guy will dominate the game, and if you manage to blink this somehow, or anything else like that, just this guy gets out of control so fast. So cool. Sieging Commander, welcome back. Next up, we've got Skirk Prospector. Skirk Prospector. A single red mana gets you a common goblin. 1/1. Sack a goblin and add red to your mana pool. Nope. As close to a 0 as you can possibly imagine here. Maybe if you're really heavy into the what was it called? Looking back into my notes. Goblin Bombardment, or is that what it's called? Goblin Barrage, there we go. If you've got that, then maybe here, but I don't know. There's some modern deck that probably wants this like Storm to just like empty the Warrens and then generate a zillion mana and then kill you with that mana. I don't really know. Moving on. Skizik. I imagine there's a noise that this Skizik makes when it attacks you. It goes Skizik. 3 in a red elemental, uncommon, 5/3, haste, trample. You may kick it for a red, and at the end of your end, if it wasn't kicked, you sacrifice Skizik. It's a fun name. It's another reprint as well, actually. Next up, we have probably one of the most annoying cards in the set. This is Squee the Immortal. Thankfully, it's not Oh, I'm thinking about Northern Wary. Never mind. One red, legendary goblin at rare. You may cast Squeeze the Immortal from your graveyard or from exile. 2/1, and this guy just can't be killed. You can't. You cannot get this guy out of the game. It's not possible. This is a pretty strong 2, actually, just because you will always have a blocker. I think it's that simple. I don't know if he's actually that good, but for cards that you just can't get rid of, strong 2s. Always playable here. Next up with our last couple of red cards here, we have the Two-Headed Giant. I see what you did there, Wizards. I see what you did. 2 red gets you a creature giant warrior at rare as a 4/4. And as it attacks, you may flip 2 coins, or you do flip 2 coins. If both coins come up heads, it gains double strike. If they come up both tails, it gains menace until the end of turn. Now, I did the math. It wasn't that hard. Half of the time that you flip your coins, you will get one of these effects. Half of the time. That's pretty impressive, actually. Decent odds, obviously. Decent body for its mana cost. Strong 2, not terribly impressive, but still, has some utility to it. Next up, we've got Valduk, Keeper of the Flame. 2 and a red, legendary creature, human shaman, 3/2. At the beginning of combat on your turn, for each aura and equipment attached to Valduk, Keeper of the Flame, make a 3/1 red elemental creature token with trample and haste, and then exile those tokens at the beginning of the next end step. I think there is some commander kid out there who's doing backflips for this guy as well, for a red Voltron commander, because reasons. Build around this guy, and I want to be the guy who casts the bounce spell in response to you going to combat. I'm sorry, I'm just like that. Build around this guy. He's decent on stats alone, but there are definitely better 3-mana 3/2s that don't need the kind of investment that Valduk is asking for here. Now, a guy who requires no investment other than mana, because I would give this guy anything he wants because he's terrifying. Varric's Bladewing, 2 red, legendary creature dragon at Mythic, 4/4, kicker 3 with flying, and if you kick it when it enters the battlefield, you make a Carrick's Bladewing. So he brings a buddy, and that comes with the battlefield token with flying as well. This guy is absolutely insane. Yeah. This will probably see some standard play as well. Along the Rekindling Phoenix, most likely. Late game, this guy's insane, and 7 mana for 8 power in the sky probably ends the game very, very fast. Next up, we've got Warcry Phoenix, who feels like this should be rare, but I'm not complaining though. 3 and a red creature Phoenix at uncommon, 2/2 flying haste. Whenever you attack with 3 or more creatures, pay 2 and a red. And if you do, Warcry Phoenix comes back to the battlefield, tapped and attacking. Wow. As long as you've got, a steady stream of aggressive creatures in your deck, this will be able to trigger multiple times in a game. Hard to kill, needs to be exiled, very, very powerful. I like Warcry Phoenix quite a bit here. Very, very strong 3 for me. Next up, we have our last 2 red cards. Warlord's Fury is first. A single red sorcery gets you a common sorcery, draws you a card, and creatures you control gain first strike until the end of turn. Now, unlike Charge in white, your opponent will see this coming a mile away because you have to cast it on your turn, not in combat where it would be most effective. So they do have the ability to kind of play around the effect here, which kind of sucks here. It's a solid 2 for me though, but it does create a very it means that your opponent needs to have a response here, obviously, because they just can't line up the blocks how they would have liked to and just trade the board away. They need to be careful here. This is a pretty powerful card. They'll see it threatening, or they'll see it coming, but it is still very threatening at the same time, and it's very, very cheap for its effect as well. I like it a lot. Next up, we've got Wizard's Lightning. Apparently, the study of magic began when the first mage taught herself to throw lightning. Nice. 2 and red instant at uncommon that costs 2 less if you control a wizard, and it deals 3 damage to any target. Lightning bolt's apparently too strong for standard, so this is what we got. Sure. Lightning strike is just as good. I don't know. 2.5 for me. If you have it in the wizard deck, by all means, you're rocking and rolling at that point. And even by itself, it's still 3 mana for 3 damage to a target, which is incredibly powerful as well. And that is the end of the red cards and the black cards. Thank you so much for watching. I'll be back shortly with the gold, the green, the artifacts and colorless, and of course the land cards as well. Would always love to know what you're excited to play in the pre-release. What are you excited to open? What kind of ideas do you have for standard, modern, and all other kinds of Magic? I'm always keen to know what you guys are thinking about and playing out there. So hit me up down in the comments and over on Facebook. Look for the EOT News Flash, and I will see you guys very, very soon for the final installment of there's the mouse, the Dominaria Limited Set Review. Thank you guys for watching. See you in a little bit.